welcome to Birkenwasser Knits episode 11. I'm Katrine Birkenwasser, and in this episode I'm going to talk about test knitting. As a designer, I of course need test knitters for testing my patterns before I publish them, but this time I was participating as a test knitter, so I can show you what I worked on. And I of course always have a gazillion of projects going on, so I'll show you some of those and progress with the ones you have seen previously. But let me start with the test knitting of this Fluting Cowl. This is a design by Whitney Hayward, and it's part of Quince and Co.'s Core Wool 2018 collection. And yeah, if you're interested in how to become a test knitter, in this case I just saw in Quince and Co.'s Ravelry group they posted a call for test knitters, and I contacted them and told them what I've been knitting before, and basically designers or the people who organize the test knitting often like to see your Ravelry ID so they can check your projects on Ravelry, and yeah, I showed them that, and of course this time I have also designed for Quince and Co, so they knew me also from that, so they said that I could participate, and they also asked for what yarn I was going to use. And this time this design is originally for Quince & Co.'s Osprey yarn, but as I didn't have that, I looked at my stash and I found this Debbie Bliss Donegal Luxury Tweed Aran yarn that's about the same weight and yardage as Osprey, so I figured that could work for the cowl. And I had exactly the amount that was needed for the smaller size. So there are two sizes of this cowl. The other one is a longer one that you can wrap around your neck. But I only had yarn enough for this smaller one, so I decided to work that. And the cowl is actually pretty simple. You knit or you cast on, and then you work this really simple, or well, it's not simple. I'll need to take a close-up of that. So you work this crisscross pattern. I don't know what you would call it, but it's like zigzags, and then when you turn it sideways it looks really neat. So it's a simple pattern. You just knit and until the knitted length, and then you do a 3 needle bind off, I think. Yeah, looks like it. And then you're done. So it's a quick project to make, and it makes a nice cowl that's gonna be really warm to wear this winter. But one of the things with test knitting is, of course, that the designers want to test how much yarn knitters will need for the project. And in this case, there was quite a bit of buffer in the yarn amount, so I had some yarn left. As I showed you, I have one whole ball left, but even I had more. And I thought that, okay, I'm gonna make a hat to go with the cowl. So I just used the same stitch pattern, and this time when I was working the hat, I just worked it from the bottom up. So it goes in a different direction than in the cowl, but I think it's, yeah, looks pretty good anyway. So I made a matching hat to go with the cowl. Yeah. And as you can see, I still have one ball of this yarn left, so the hat took one ball, and oh, I don't remember what was this, maybe one. This was maybe more than just one. Yeah, but anyway, I still have one more ball left, so maybe enough to make another hat. Let's see, I'll probably make something else. but I know now that it's enough to make a hat. So here's a close-up of the stitch pattern. As you can see, it's knit and purl stitches that form this chevron, or I don't know what to call it, pattern, but then I used the same one for the hat, so I think they make a nice set. Yeah, but you might be also looking at what else I'm wearing, and this is my own design. It's a fade sweater. The fade goes from one sleeve to another, and the reason why I'm wearing this when I'm talking about test knitting is because I'm looking for test knitters for this design, and you can check my Ravelry group for the call for test knitters, and there's more information there. But now that I'm talking about test knitting, I can also tell you more about how I choose test knitters and what I expect from my test knitters. So basically, I try to look at, like I mentioned, that I look at the projects that the knitter has on Ravelry. And that kind of gives me an idea if the person has knitted similar items that they will be capable of doing it. And if you don't have any projects on Ravelry, then it might be a good idea to maybe send an email with pictures of some projects that you've worked, or just list designs on Ravelry that you have worked. And the reason why I like to see that you have knitted something similar, so let's say that I wouldn't like to choose people who haven't knitted sweaters before. So if you've knitted maybe cowls and hats like this before in a heavier yarn, and then you want to sign up for, this is fingering weight merino singles that I used for this design, then it might turn out that you notice that it's too much for you, and then that's not a nice experience for you or for me, so we'll both be disappointed, and of course that's not a nice experience for either one of us. So I try to make sure that you can finish the project in the given timeline. So there's always a deadline for the test knits. I have a plan of when I'm going to publish the pattern, even if it's self-publishing. And then of course if I'm working for a magazine or for a yarn company, they might have their deadlines, and then I will need to have the pattern ready at a certain date, so then I will also need to have my test knitters finished by that date. So it's always a thing that I try to find a group of test knitters who I'm pretty sure that can finish the project and who will enjoy knitting it. So sometimes if a project is really difficult and you're struggling with it, then it's not fun, and also the test knitting experience is not so much fun. So for my test knits, I like to think of them in a way as knit-alongs. You might have seen the abbreviation KAL many times. So it's usually knit-alongs can be anything. They can be knit-along of a certain pattern or a certain designer's patterns or whatever. But anyway, I like to think of these test knits also as knit-alongs, and often it means that there's a thread in my Ravelry group forum, and just all test knitters post in the thread. They post pictures of their progress and any comments or mistakes they might find in the pattern, and then others can also see those comments and comment on them, and often there are different ways of explaining things, so I might ask that, okay, if that's difficult to understand, then would this be better or this, and then it's easier if everyone who's participating can see and comment on those. And it's a nice experience also for me, even if I'm not knitting. I'm just trying to follow and keep up with where everyone is going, and it's also nice for me to know that people are progressing. So it's one of the expectations that I have is that you post a picture or an update of where you are once a week. So then even if for a sweater test I usually give like 2 months time to knit, and then it's nice to hear from you every week to see that you are progressing and not in a way just send the pattern and then hear back in 2 months, and usually I already know that if I don't get those progress reports, then there's not going to be a finished item either. So that's yeah. So I like to think of it as a nice knitting experience for the test knitters and also for myself. Of course, it's devastating to hear what kind of problems there are in my pattern, but I would like to think that my patterns are perfect when they come off my laptop, but of course that's not the case, and you just can't notice all those things when you write something. It's of course it's clear for you, but then it might not be so clear for the reader. So I really appreciate the help that I get from my test knitters, and I do like to pay back, even if I don't pay in cash. Then I always give my test knitters the finished pattern, so they get that in their Ravelry library once the pattern is published, if I self-publish, of course. And then I usually also give a code, so the test knitters can choose one of my previously published, self-published patterns and download that for free from my Ravelry store. Yeah, and what else can I say about test knitting? So basically I really appreciate every comment and question that my test knitters have about the patterns. So I like to hear every little detail that doesn't look good or seems a bit confusing, because that's the only way to improve, and of course it makes life so much easier after publishing the pattern when then I don't get comments and questions afterwards from people who bought the pattern. But of course, as a test knitter, you have to have this certain attitude towards test knitting, that there will be mistakes in the pattern, and some numbers might not match up, and one of the things, of course, like I mentioned, is the yarn amount that is also being tested. So I try to add buffer enough so that test knitters wouldn't run out of yarn. But then if you count on there being buffer, it might be that yeah, the amounts are not exact. So then I check the amounts after I get the feedback from the test knitters. I don't think anyone ever really ran out of yarn. There might be something coming close, or maybe yeah, just missing a little bit. And of course you have to be prepared that you know there is a mistake, and then you only notice that after you've knitted past the part where that mistake was, and you notice that now the number of stitches don't match up. And then I'll need to correct something that was already written before that. And usually I try to find a way so the test knitters don't need to rip back and work the same part again. So often if you miss an increase or decrease, you can do that, add that later to get your stitch count to match, or you just leave it out. And a lot of times with knitwear, of course, it's depends on your gauge and the or the fabric stretches. So I always think that it's funny when you do the conversions from metric system to imperial, and then you add like a quarter of an inch, and really I'm saying that if you measure any knitted item like the length of a sleeve, then a quarter of an inch is within your measurement error, so you get different measures every time you measure, depending on where you measure and how. So it really doesn't make any sense to add those quarter inches, but then again it looks weird if you don't, because then people notice that the centimeters and inches don't match. And yeah, so there are a lot of, this is like an issue that always comes up. And yeah, so I usually just add the 1/4 inches, even if it doesn't make any sense to add them, or 1/2 centimeter. Yeah. But anyways, if you are interested in test knitting, I have a earburn list on Ravelry, so please join the earburn list, and then you'll be notified of all my test knits. There's no need to reply if I just add an earburn to everyone on the list, and if you're interested, then you can reply. But it just gives you a heads up that there's a new testing call, and you can see if you'd like to participate. But this fade sweater is, the testing call is up, so please check the call for test knitters, and if you're interested, you will need a 5 color fade. I'll add a picture of the beautiful fade that I used for this one. It's by Lustig yarn, and you'll need to find something similar. And then, yeah, just let me know if you're interested. But now let's look at some of the other projects that I'm working on at the moment. And here's a new fade project that I'm working on. So this is my own design. It's going to be a triangle shawl. I'm calling it Fade and Fringe. So it's going to have these garter stitch sections followed by lace, and then there's going to be a fringe. So that's what I'm working on now. And after that I'm gonna start fading to the next color, and then just repeat for 4 colors. And I think it's going to be pretty big, so it should be a lovely shawl that you can wrap yourself with. And yeah, I'm using mostly twisted finch yarns, so these 3 are twisted finch singles, and then I have 1 hedgehog fibers skinny single to go to be the lightest color of this fade. So this is, yeah, I think it looks pretty good, or at least it looks like the way I planned. So let's hope that it continues in such a nice manner once I get to the fading part. So that's all for this time, and yeah, I'll see you next week for something new.